you all. It's really good to be here. I am super nervous, so I took my sweater off and I'm going to be sweating. But so many of you are like family and friends, and I know that hopefully I can just get through this, and I want to be comfortable. I hope I don't read the whole thing. I want to be real with you. I want you to experience just God's faithfulness through my testimony this morning, or my little talk. So good morning. A few weeks ago I ran into Janice at church, and she looks at me as if she hadn't thought about it, honestly, and I'm sure she hadn't even. She looks at me all of a sudden and she goes, "Would you speak at our women's breakfast?" And I look at her and I go, "On what?" and then again, she, off the top of her head, she said, "On the faithfulness of God in your life." And I'm like, oh, and right away I knew that I was supposed to do it. But I thought, I said, I'll tell you in a few days. I can't, I'll let you know in a few days. So I went home and I thought about it and prayed about it, even though I knew I didn't even need to pray about it because I knew God wanted me to do this. So anyways, but then the doubts came. I said, who am I? Oh, goodness. Sue promised me that if I start crying, she'll stick her finger up her nose. There's no reason for me to cry through this thing, but for some reason I do when I read it. But anyways, the doubts came, and I thought, who am I? Who am I to tell you my story of God's faithfulness? I have not been through the loss of a child, or the loss of a husband, or a divorce, or a devastating illness. That's not who I've been through. Like, that's not me. And I said to Janice, who am I to tell this story? And she goes, Marj, that's exactly it. It's about telling your story about God's faithfulness in the everyday lives that we live. And so this is my story, some of my story. My stories would take even a little bit more pages than this. But it's a story that God has given me. And I really pray that God speaks to your heart through my story. I was raised in a solid Christian home. I went to a fantastic church. I've been a believer for as long as I can remember. I even went to MEI, private high school. I was immersed in the Bible. I remember those years. Jesus showed me many new and exciting things. I just grew in my faith. Then in grade 11, I sang in an amazing choir in our school. And with that choir, we went on a big festival to Winnipeg. And on this tour is when I met Dave. And he, of course, was a class clown. And as he would say, he still talks about how about the pretty girl that stood in front of him with the cute butt. And, he kept wanting to sit with me on the bus, and that's where that began. So then after high school, I went to Bible school, Okanagan Bible Institute, and it's right on Okanagan Lake. It's an absolutely beautiful setting. There, God became more real and personal to me than I've ever experienced before. I had to get up really early some mornings because I was involved in getting the breakfast ready sometimes. And I would run out onto this big dock and I would put my arms in the air and I'd go, "Good morning, Lord." And it was just one of those natural things. And I remember one morning I was sitting on the dock and this duck from nowhere, all by himself, came right up to my legs, and it was almost like, God saying to me, "Good morning," right back. And I just always felt like it was a little gift from God, and it's funny, I still remember that. During this time, my dad was very, very sick with cancer. And in February of 1982, while I was in Bible school, he passed away. Thankfully, I'd been home the weekend before and was able to say goodbye. But my poor mother and my 16-year-old sister at the time had to deal with a whole lot more than I even realized. Even to this day, I still hear of things that they went through, and I'm just shocked that I wasn't there for that. So those were hard days, but also I was having a ton of fun because now second semester, Dave had missed me so much, so now he joined me at Bible school, and so that was fun. And we also had a ton of friends, and so life was just a lot of fun. During this time at Bible school, I was really seeking my relationship, seeking God about my relationship with Dave. Is this the man he really wanted for me? He was such a goof, and I was not like that. But I had so much fun with him, and I needed to know if this was serious, like if this is what God wanted. So one day, often I would go up behind our Bible school and I would sit on a big rock in the forest there and pray. It's all houses there now, it's the weirdest thing. But anyway, I would go and sit on this rock and I would spend time alone with God. And this one time while I was doing that, I was really praying and asking God, is this the man that you want me to spend the rest of my life with? And the funny thing is very strongly in my mind, I got the words to this song, and the words are, in his time, he makes all things beautiful in his time. And I remember clearly it was as if God was saying to me, in my time, I'm going to make your relationship beautiful. And so in 1984, January 1984, we got married and we went off and had 3 babies. And but I went back to that promise many times because marriage is hard. And I needed God to encourage me, remember, he is the man that I gave you, and stick it out. And slowly as the years have gone by, slowly, sometimes slower than others, it has gotten more and more beautiful. And I look back now, especially that the kids are gone, and we can have a lot more fun together, and I feel like our relationship is getting more and more beautiful now even. But before all that, and after Bible school, I went into hairdressing professionally. But I've really been doing it my whole life. Just ask my sister, who I've been practicing on since she was born. Oh, and we've got stories. But it's really built into me. But I wasn't even going to tell, but I remember when our parents gave us a curling iron for the first time, and I practiced on her and I rolled it down her neck. Or the time, have you ever seen the Brady Bunch back in the day, and she had this cute little haircut with this fringe, Mrs. Brady? Well, my sister wanted that cut. So I said, oh, I can do that. Wow. What a disaster. But I have learned a few things since then. But what a gift from God this talent has been. I was able to work in our home and work around Dave's schedule or the kids' school hours and still be the stay-at-home mom I always wanted to be. To top it off, it's a job where I get to play with hair and visit all day and get paid for it. Hairdressing has been such an incredible blessing in so many ways. I actually didn't even expect to talk about this morning because it's so much a part of who I am. It's just an extension of me, and when I walk out of my salon, I forget that it's even there. Like it's just a part of me. But a while back, I was asking God what my purpose was. What was it? How was it that he wanted me to serve him in a more practical way now that our kids were grown? Or just whenever. And what I heard was my family and my salon, my clients. While I was prepping for this talk, I started writing about some of the things that have gone on in my salon, and the stories just kept coming. And I was overwhelmed by that. Sue? That really works. I have the incredible privilege of walking with people through life. I see many of the same people every 6 weeks or so, and you really get to know them. They often tell you things they wouldn't tell anybody else because you're safe. And who am I going to tell? I've learned that when someone loses a loved one, they often just want to talk about it. So I ask questions about that loved one, and we laugh and we cry together, and it's healing. I had a client who was having a serious health issue, and she was terrified to tell her kids. So we walked through how to do that together. She later called me that day to ask me how I knew the exact words to help her through that. And all I know is that it had to have been the Holy Spirit because I'm just not that smart. I think of another woman who was and still is really seeking God, but not close enough to trusting him yet. After one appointment, she hugged me and she said, I don't just come here for my hair, you know. I come here for my soul. And when she walked out the door, I burst into tears and I ran into the garage where Dave was working in the garage, and I said, this is why I do hair. So there have been times where before they leave, we pray together about whatever the concern was that we've talked about it. But it's not just one-sided. My clients have taught me so very much and have given me advice and walked me through things in my life too. What a blessing that is to me. I've literally had others wrap their arms around me and pray for me too. Every single day before I work, I pray that God will make me a blessing to my clients and that he will guard and guide my words, because a salon can be a real easy place for gossip, and I don't want that. And that can be a hard thing when it's very easy to gossip, and you have to be so careful. But I've also been a safe place for people to dump about someone, often when people I don't even know. And then we can talk through how to deal with the frustration. I feel honored and blessed that God has given me such an amazing job. God has also taught me a lot about people, and I have all kinds in my salon. I started out in a very expensive, high-end salon for my apprenticeship. We had many of the very, very wealthy people in Abbotsford come to our salon, and I shampooed many of their heads, and I learned very early on that we are all the same with our hair wet. I have also learned to love and appreciate people who at first I thought were odd or really intimidating. I did one woman for a long time who was a power businesswoman, in her 60s, tall, single, beautiful, and intimidating, until I got to know her. I saw how vulnerable she was when she lost her mom, and we worked through that over many appointments. What a beautiful heart she had. Or the person who just seemed so odd, until I heard her story and saw her heart. Another beautiful person. We all struggle with first impressions, but I've learned to give it time and really try to know that person. And every time you will find beauty in them. And I could go on and on. Then there's Martha. Martha Tisu. Then there's Martha Tisu, whose hair I did for many, many years. She never married and would tell you that that was because her husband had died in infancy. Isn't that the best? I actually heard her. I would have other clients come in and while she was there, and you would get, people would often just want to know who she is, and and are you married and stuff, and she'd go, oh no, my husband died in infancy. It's so cool. So anyways, one time I was doing her hair and she asked for a picture of my daughter so she could pray for a husband for her. Within a few months, Tanya had met Nathan. The last time I did Martha's hair, she was 96 years old, and I went to her home to do it. I took Tanya with me, who by now is 8 months pregnant. Martha was so thrilled, but she was also so very weak and really just tired of life. She just wanted to go to heaven, and so we asked her if we should pray that God would take her soon. And I can still hear her say, that would be lovely. Totally. She slipped away several weeks later, and both Tanya and I went to her funeral. She was an incredibly wise woman who spoke often into my life. She even had written out this little card for me, a piece of paper on things to do, every day in life, just to make you, for optimal living. And I still have it tucked in my Bible. In her handwriting, I love that. As I write this, I am reminded of story after story of people I've had the privilege of making beautiful. I could go on a long time here. Then there is the ministry to my family. It's weird to call it ministry because it comes so natural and I love them so much. We have a son, David, or DJ, as some of you know him, and he's married to Sherry. Then is Tanya, who's married to Nathan. And then Kara, our baby, who's here, who married Garrett. Sue? Kara, our baby, who married Garrett when they were just babies themselves. Between them all, they have given us 10 absolutely wonderful, amazing grandkids, and I am so happy I don't have to raise them. But wow, having kids sure does things for your prayer life. First we had 3 kids, and that had me praying. Then they all married, and then there were 6. Then they go and have all these babies, and then I could be praying all day, and sometimes I am. But it's often through family that you see God and feel God's faithfulness the most. It's those prayers that are the most desperate. And I have seen God over and over again answer those desperate prayers. It is because of these things that I know our God loves us so very much and cares about every single detail of our lives, big and small. It's also because I have seen his incredible faithfulness, and when something new comes up, that I can go back in my life and I can look back at these things and know that he's going to be faithful in this circumstance too. The dumb thing is you still worry. But I know that he will be faithful, but it's still hard, and we all know that. When our son David was 2 weeks old, he started seizuring just on his left side. I was terrified. The Abbotsford doctors sent us to Children's, and on the way there, I experienced a peace that I cannot fully explain. It felt like a warm blanket was draped over me, and that peace that passes all understanding that the Bible talks about is what I felt. Ever since then, when I hear of somebody going through something really hard, that is what I pray for them. In that moment, I had no idea of the outcome. Later that day, we found out he had a blood clot on the right side of his brain that made the left side of his body seizure. We were told all kinds of things, like he could die, or have brain damage, or never use his left side properly. And even though I cried and cried, the peace remained, and it was amazing. To make a long story short, our prayers and the prayers of many others were answered, and he is still very much alive, and mostly normal. He has a lovely family, and he has a passionate, strong faith. We became very involved in our church. One summer, Dave and I were chaperones on a youth missions trip to Mexico. And while we were there, God very clearly showed each Dave and I separately that he wanted us to go back there and work there a while. Our kids were 6, 4, and 2. We sought out wise people for advice to help us seek God to see if we'd actually heard correctly. We set out some fleeces, so to speak, and God very clearly answered those requests. So we sold our home and we're in Mexico by December 1st. We started out at the orphanage that we had been at on the summer missions trip. We helped build a new facility and also did a lot of work in the village with the locals. This story in itself could take a long time to tell you. But needless to say, we saw God so very clearly provide in miraculous ways that we have often said that God works more obviously in Mexico than he does here. And I could tell you story after story of it. And I know any of you that have been missionaries in a third world country or worked there for any reason have seen this too. It's incredible. And the depth of the people and I remember coming back and so much of the conversations that we have are so shallow. And in Mexico, the conversations were always deep and they were God-centered, and I felt like I was starving when I came back. But it was an amazing time. Let's see, where am I? Our son is our only kid who really remembers it, and he said it has impacted who he is to this day. We were gone about only 10 months, and when our work was finished and we came home. I have another story that I've told many times, but it is one of my favorites. When our son was 9 or 10 years old, he desperately wanted a dirt bike. He had gotten to ride one that summer, and now he was desperate to own his own. Well, our budget did not allow for a dirt bike, but I told him it didn't hurt to pray for one. So he literally prayed, breakfast, lunch, supper, bedtime, every single day. And I'm not kidding you. And he prayed that God would give him a dirt bike. This went on for months and was getting a little redundant, but whatever. Then Dave was given an old pickup truck that he put a little bit of money to that he decided he was going to sell. And let's see here. I know the story, I still have to look. So he got a call, just around Christmas time, he got a call from a guy who wanted the truck, but didn't quite have enough money. That if we would consider a little dirt bike. Are you kidding me? I still look at that. Have you ever sold anything and somebody offered you a little dirt bike as well? Like, never. So anyway, this was clearly a direct answer to a little boy's prayer that we will never forget. It was the perfect size and everything. And a little story that I don't have written down, but I remember him, I thought of it on the way here. I remember him asking me, why didn't God give me a brand new dirt bike? And it wasn't because he was being selfish. He was this kid that really was trying to figure God out. And I remember saying to him, David, the reason you didn't, look at what happened with that dirt bike. I remember one winter, him and Dave took that whole thing apart, and they wanted to make it faster. And they redid everything, and they painted the whole thing up, and they made it end up looking brand new. And I said to him, you would have never learned all that if you had gotten a brand new one. And think of the quality time you got to spend with your dad. And he was like, oh, yeah. So, I'll never forget though, when he sold it. He outgrew it and he sold it. And I never would forget it driving down the road on the back of someone else's truck, and I couldn't stop the tears because that bike had just been such a witness. He still tells about that same story in his own testimony. That was the beginning of a whole new chapter in the Hiebert home. We eventually all got dirt bikes, and it became the thing our family did for fun. We built amazing relationships with other families who did the same thing, many who are still friends to this day. Sue? Now, many of our grandkids have dirt bikes too, and it's still a big part of our family. I remember when one of our kids was in a dating relationship way too young that we were very concerned about. That sweet young boy at 9 years old had told his mom he was going to marry our daughter someday. By the time he was 12, he had won her over. And there was literally no stopping him. Believe me, we tried. We had these conferences with them. Anyways, I remember one night when they were about 16 or 17, I couldn't sleep, and I was up praying about this relationship when I clearly heard in my spirit God saying to me, "Don't worry about them, I've got it down." I will never forget that, and I hung on to it whenever I was concerned. I was sure God was going to break them up. They were so incredibly different. But in God's amazing providence, faithfulness, and care, they got married very young, and they have been married for over 10 years and have 4 wonderful, spirited children. Their story is long and beautiful, and we can clearly look back and see why and how God worked in them the way he did. And his mom is here. At the end of 2019, I was really starting to not feel well. I was feeling a lot of dizziness, and my legs often felt really weak, like they may just give out. It had actually been going on off and on for a lot of years. Every now and then I would feel it. But anyways, now it was almost constant, and I was a little afraid maybe I had MS or something. One day it came to a head, so I finally went to the doctor. After a long discussion, she told me that she felt it was not physical. She told me it was fatigue or burnout, and I needed to take a month off. I thought this was a bit ridiculous. But Dave and I had both lost our moms the year before, and we were also in the middle of a very busy stage with our kids as they were just kept having babies after babies. And I was working, and we also had a very busy, fun social life. None of this seemed unusual to me. It actually still doesn't. When my sister found out that the doctor had told me to take time off, she got very strong with me. And she told me I needed to listen to the doctor. I told her, I've got clients coming, I'm booked way in advance. There's no way I can just cancel them. And again, she was very strong with me, and she told me she would personally call my clients and did not give me a choice. As soon as I realized she wasn't giving me a choice, I burst into tears because something inside of me knew that that's exactly what I needed. So with 2 or 3 weeks off, my symptoms all were gone, and I went back to work. Within 2 weeks, they were all back again. So my doctor told me to take off 5 months, and then COVID hit. And God didn't just shut me down, he shut down, sorry guys. He shut down the whole world, making sure I actually did rest. Those few months turned out to be incredible times with God. I felt like he said to me, okay, now I just want you to enjoy me. I read an amazing book called The Rest of God by Marj Hiebert. I actually read it twice. And I felt truly like God made me lie down in green pastures. I felt like he actually led me beside still waters, and he truly restored my soul. Our kids were very supportive and really wanted me to go get some counseling to figure this thing out. I have a client who's a women's pastor who also does some counseling, so I went to her over Zoom and the phone, and she walked me through who I was in Christ and helped me set some boundaries. I am now working much less and enjoying it more than I have in years. Also, our grandkids are getting older and easier, so that's been a good thing too. There are so many other stories I could tell you of God's amazing faithfulness in my life. I am thankful beyond measure for each thing, good or bad, hard or easy, that he has walked me through so far. Some things that nourish me spiritually are a Bible study I've been involved in for maybe 10 years. We started out as 3 women, now we're about 6 or 7. We're mostly from different churches, and we often do an in-depth Bible study with lots of homework. Well, when COVID hit, we were not allowed to meet, which killed us, so we decided to meet every Wednesday at Aldergrove Park and walk and pray together. We focused totally on praying for each other's families. I think it was the very first week we were there, on the drive there, it was pouring rain. And, but seriously, when we got out of our cars, it stopped. It completely stopped. We walked and prayed. As soon as we got back into our cars, it started pouring again. I'm not kidding you. We would joke about how we never had to worry about our prayer walk because, you guys, it didn't just happen that one time. It happened over and over. It was the craziest thing. We would get there, it would be pouring rain, and literally we never got rained on. It was amazing. anyways, those 2.5 years, or 2 years really, I guess, we have seen absolute amazing answers to prayer for our families. We have prayed through infertility and job loss, relationship stress, and the loss of loved ones. One of the girls lost her mother and her both her in-laws within a year. We even prayed for a grandkid who was too afraid to poop. Nothing was too big or small to bring to our amazing, faithful God. And wow, you guys, have we seen him work. Our story... Our stories, they matter to God. He has given them to help us grow strong in him, and then to encourage and comfort and help others. Every trial or joy helps you to be relatable to someone else. If we don't share our stories, how will people know about our amazing God? I really encourage you to go home and pretend you have to give a 20-minute talk on the faithfulness of God in your life, and just watch how God heaps on the memories of all he has done for you. I could go on and on. Your story is incredibly special to him. Tell someone.